At the center of all the campus chaos we've observed in recent years is a fundamental philosophical question. A question with which I think we all need to reacquaint ourselves, but especially those of us in academia. What is the purpose of a college education? Is it to learn what to think, or is it to learn how to think? That difference may sound subtle, but the implications are profound. What I appreciate most about my college education is not once was I ever told what to think. Instead, I was given a daily exercise in how to think, how to receive new concepts, how to evaluate them, and how to decide for myself which ideas are good and which ideas are bad. And those exercises operated according to a certain philosophy, that it's only through comparing ideas and allowing them to compete that we can identify the good ones from the bad ones. That means to evaluate ideas, we have to consider all ideas, the good ones and the bad ones alike. And because all ideas enter that competitive arena, that process necessarily means your existing ideas will be challenged, which can be uncomfortable. But if your feelings are a casualty in that battle of ideas, the burden is on you to strengthen them, not on others to soften winning concepts or soften the truth. And this approach exists in contrast to being taught what to think, to simply having the quote-unquote correct ideas installed in your mind and accepting them uncritically. Accepting ideas not because they've emerged the victor in battle, but because someone in a position of authority told you they're the right ideas to hold. And the consequences of these two philosophies are quite stark. One produces an open-minded, intellectually agile, free-thinking problem solver, and the other produces a one-dimensional mind trained only in the art of repeating what it's told. And I worry, based on what I observe, that the philosophy of teaching what to think is becoming increasingly common, perhaps even predominant, and we are cultivating a generation of minds who no longer uphold that critical value of question everything, and instead question nothing. Questioning and inquiring and examining have morphed from an intellectual imperative to some type of moral failure. The consequences of this philosophical shift are on full display currently at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, Ontario, where a communications teaching assistant named Lindsay Shepherd was guiding a classroom discussion on language use, specifically gender pronouns, and the conflict between addressing people as they wish to be addressed versus the rights of others not to be forced to use certain words they do not believe apply. If you want to be called a woman, should I be forced to call you a woman? We've all experienced this debate in one form or another. If you wanted to examine that debate, presumably you'd offer some thoughts from a person who uses a unique set of pronouns, and you'd offer some thoughts from a person who is against compelled speech. And that's exactly what Shepherd did when she played a 3-minute clip of Jordan Peterson in that debate on the agenda, which you may remember for a famous quote from that transgender studies professor.
Basically, it's not correct that there is such a thing as biological sex.
In that exchange, Peterson explained what he views as a free speech infringement, forcing him and others to use words they don't want to use.
There were two things that really bothered me, although there have been other things I've thought about since. One was that I was being asked, as everyone is, to use a certain set of words that I think are the constructions of people who have a political ideology that I don't believe in and that I also regard as dangerous.
What are those words?
Those are the made-up words that people now describe as gender neutral, and so to me they're an attempt to control language and in a direction that isn't happening organically. It's not happening naturally. People aren't picking up these words in the typical way that new words are picked up, but by force and by fiat.
Now, according to Shepherd's testimony, she presented both sides of this debate neutrally and encouraged students to think critically about each side and decide for themselves who's right. She put the ideas into the competitive arena, and the students oversaw that competition. In other words, she provided the students with an exercise in learning how to think. She did not tell them what to think. But that'll get you in trouble with a university that isn't philosophically sound with its mission and purpose. One of Shepard's students filed a complaint with the school, and as a result, Shepard was censured and summoned for a meeting with 2 communications department professors and someone with a job at the diversity office that has a title so long I have to read it to deliver the line properly. The acting manager of gendered violence and sexual assault prevention and support at the Diversity and Equity Office. I wonder if that even fits on a business card. This meeting was secretly recorded, presumably by Shepard herself, but I'm not sure. Regardless, the audio is now publicly available, and the discussion is every bit as Orwellian as I could possibly fear. I encourage you to listen to it for yourself. It's only 10 minutes long, linked in the description. For this video, I want to focus on the segments that really illustrate how these faculty aren't interested in teaching students how to think. They are interested in teaching students what to think. Shepard begins by describing her view on the purpose of a college education, challenging and comparing ideas.
Might have been seen as problematic by some of the students, maybe even threatening.
I don't see how someone would rationally think it was threatening. I could see how it might challenge their existing ideas, but for me, that's the spirit of the university, is challenging ideas that you already have. The thing is, can you shield people from those ideas? Am I supposed to comfort them and make sure that they are insulated away from this? Like, is that what the point of this is? Because to me, that is so against what a university is about. So against it.
And the response is that certain ideas or certain perspectives or certain arguments are never to be entertained because at minimum they create a toxic environment for students, and at worst they are actually the same thing as violence or threats and therefore may actually violate Canadian law. But they aren't talking about threats, mind you, just arguments, just thoughts about the way the world exists or ought to exist.
If you're presenting something like this, you have to think about the kind of teaching climate that you're creating. This is actually, these arguments are counter to the Canadian Human Rights Code. It is discriminatory to be targeting someone due to their gender identity or gender expression. The reality is that it has created a toxic climate for some of the students.
What I have a problem with is I didn't target anybody. Who did I target?
Trans folks.
How? By telling them ideas that are really out there? By telling them that? By telling them? Really? Sorry, what did I violate in that policy?
So, gender-based violence, transphobia, causing harm to trans students by framing their identity as invalid.
So, by proxy of me showing a YouTube video, I'm transphobic and I caused harm and violence. So be it.
And of course, the question of whether anyone was in fact targeted or was in fact threatened is irrelevant. What matters is the way people feel, because the line at which any one individual's discomfort starts is the line at which intellectual examination for all must stop.
It's more about the effect rather than the intention. If that, like, obviously that wasn't your intention, but nevertheless, it disturbed and upset students enough.
So everything's about those students who are disturbed. Everything is catered to them.
As the conversation develops, it's fascinating that what Shepard views as a defense, the faculty view as a violation. She says she presented the material neutrally and invited students to dissect and debate, but the faculty view that approach explicitly as a problem.
I was not taking sides. I was presenting both arguments.
It's not just telling them in legitimizing this as a valid perspective, as this is another valid perspective.
In a
on these
university,
issues.
all perspectives are valid.
That's not necessarily true, Lindsay.
Well, this is something that's being debated in current society, and I don't feel the need to shield people from what's going on in society. I don't think I gave away any kind of political position of mine. I remained very neutral. And
that's kind of the problem.
Instead, the faculty argue that Shepard has an affirmative duty to tell students which ideas are wrong, even comparing Jordan Peterson to Hitler.
Not to kind of do the thing where everything is kind of compared to Hitler, but this is like neutrally playing a speech by Hitler or Milo Yiannopoulos from Gamergate. This is the kind of thing that departmentally, in terms of like critical communication studies and in terms of the course of what we're trying to do, is diametrically opposed to everything that we've been talking about in the lectures.
Now, aside from the ridiculous false equivalence here, yes, you should present speeches from Hitler for analysis if that is the subject matter of the course. I read Mein Kampf in college. I read the Communist Manifesto. I read works responsible for human suffering on a monumental scale, but I read those works to decide for myself what I think of the content, and I never once interpreted the assignment of the reading to be a threat from the instructor. Speaking of key principles we are losing, entertaining an idea is not the same thing as endorsing it. And that's the great irony here. Shepard doesn't even agree with Jordan Peterson.
The thing is, what's kind of funny is I disagree with Jordan Peterson. I disagree, but you guys seem to think that I'm like pro Jordan Peterson or something.
On her Twitter page, Shepard explains clearly. Regarding those claiming I have a right-wing agenda, unfortunately, you have missed the point. Freedom to circulate ideas and debate current affairs is everyone's issue. I am a leftist, but I do not represent the leftism of these communications professors who believe in shutting down opposition. The university has appointed a third-party investigator to gather the facts of this case. It remains to be seen what the outcome will be. But the philosophical distinction that Shepard identifies is exactly the one the university will have to navigate for itself. Do you believe in identifying good ideas and bad ideas by discussing them and comparing them and contrasting them openly and freely with a faith in good ideas to rise and bad ideas to fall? Or do you want a small group of people with the power to decide what the good ideas are and the power to impose them upon the rest of us? If you believe in the latter approach, if you believe in shutting down opposition as the best pathway to truth, that's your choice. But I and others will suggest that university is an inappropriate title for your institution. Do you strive to teach people how to think, or do you insist on telling them what to think? That is the distinction between Wilfrid Laurier University and Wilfrid Laurier Indoctrination Camp. So sit down, reflect, and decide what you want to be. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Okay, bye.